Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to another episode of International Relations this week. Every Wednesday under this series, we have been covering important geopolitical developments of the last week which have a bearing on India's national interests. These discussions are strictly designed to help you prepare for the UPSC Civil Services examination. So if you have been benefiting from this initiative, all you have to do is support us by liking the video, share your comments, and without fail, subscribe to our channel. So let's start this week's episode of International Relations. Let's take a look at the topics we're going to cover. First, we shall talk about the Indus Water Treaty, which has been making a lot of news over the last 1 week. Then we shall take a look at the deep economic crisis that Pakistan is staring at. We shall also talk about the World Economic Forum, because in the last week of January, the annual summit of the World Economic Forum came to an end and there were some important outcomes. So we shall discuss this topic as well. And finally, we shall take a look at the Russia-Ukraine war, as there has been a major development. Western countries led by US and Germany have promised to send advanced battle tanks to Ukraine to help defend itself against the Russian invasion. So these are the important topics that we have lined up for today. And let's start with the first topic. We shall discuss about the Indus Water Treaty. But what is the context? Last week, India issued a notice to Pakistan calling for a negotiation and modification of the Indus Water Treaty. This is seen as a landmark step by India and also a strategic move by India. Because the Indus Water Treaty is the lifeline for Pakistan. I hope you know that the Indus River Basin itself is seen as a lifeline for Pakistan's economy. Pakistan is heavily dependent on the Indus River system for drinking water, for irrigation, and also for industrial usage. And since India is the upper riparian state here, we enjoy a natural advantage. And Pakistan, being the downstream country or the lower riparian state, has always feared the misuse of these waters by India. Ever since India-Pakistan got partitioned, there was no clarity on how these waters would be shared. The Indus River Basin is comprised of 6 major rivers, which you can see in the map over here. It includes the Indus, the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Satluj. Most of these rivers have their origin in the Tibetan ranges, in the Himalayan belt, and they flow down from India's Jammu and Kashmir towards Pakistan. And eventually they drain into the Arabian Sea. So sharing of these waters was always a concern, especially for Pakistan, considering that it was a lower riparian state. So in 1960, India-Pakistan worked out a historic treaty, the Indus Water Treaty, which was mediated by the World Bank. Please note down this point, it can be very important for your prelims. The World Bank mediated the Indus Water Treaty, and both India and Pakistan signed this agreement. And since then, it has stood the test of time. As you know, India-Pakistan relations have always gone through a lot of ups and downs. There have been many wars and conflicts that we have fought. There have been repeated terror attacks against India, which has increased tensions between the two countries. But despite all these phases, the Indus Water Treaty has stood firm as India has remained committed to the treaty. So first, let's understand the key provisions of the treaty and then discuss the need for renegotiating it and what is Pakistan's position and what is India's stand. The Indus Water Treaty divided the Indus River Basin into western rivers and eastern rivers. The western rivers, as you can see here, includes the Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab. And the eastern rivers, which includes Ravi, Beas, and Satluj, they were categorized under the Indus Water Treaty. The Indus River Basin was categorized into these two groups, western and eastern rivers. The western rivers were largely allocated to Pakistan. Western rivers have a higher volume of water flow compared to the eastern rivers. Considering Pakistan's dependency on these 3 western rivers, a larger share was allocated to Pakistan. In total, if you take the entire Indus River Basin and the water sharing treaty which has been worked out, nearly 80% of the water flow has been allocated to Pakistan, while 20% of it has been allocated to India. When it comes to these western rivers, that is Indus, Jhelum and Chenab, Pakistan has greater control over it because India's control has been restricted. India has been provided very limited usage of the western rivers, and we can use these waters only for non-consumptive purposes, which means India cannot construct any dams which will divert the flow of the river or hold the flow of the water back. We can only execute run-of-the-mill projects such as hydropower projects which do not divert the water or which do not hold the water back. We can make use of limited share of the waters for basic drinking purposes, navigation, environmental and ecological purposes, etc., and also for power generation. But India's rights over these three rivers is very, very restricted, and Pakistan has been allotted greater control and a greater share of these waters. India has strictly abided by the terms of the treaty, and over the last 4 to 5 decades, we have never breached the terms of the Indus Water Treaty. Even though it largely benefits Pakistan, India has respected this as it is highly committed to maintaining international rules and international law. On the other hand, the eastern rivers were largely allocated to India. India more or less has exclusive rights over the eastern rivers. And Ravi, Bias and Satluj, they are the lifeline of northern and northwestern India, especially states like Punjab, Haryana, etc. They are heavily dependent on these waters for agriculture and for other purposes. So here India is free to construct any kind of dam it wants, divert the water for irrigation, for drinking water, etc. And whatever remains should be allowed to flow into Pakistan. So India has exclusive rights over these eastern rivers, and we have greater control and a greater share. But in total, if you take the whole river basin into account, nearly 80% of the water is allocated to Pakistan, with 20% share allocated to India. India was comfortable with this arrangement because it would meet our needs. It would still allow us to execute run-of-the-mill power projects on western rivers while fulfilling the needs of Pakistan. So in the interest of promoting good ties with Pakistan and to send out a goodwill gesture, the then Nehru government agreed to the terms of the Indus Water Treaty. Even though it invited a lot of opposition within India, that India was making a lot of concessions, the government of India went ahead with the treaty in the interest of building better ties with Pakistan. Under the treaty, Indus Water Commission is set up in both the countries, headed by Indus Water Commissioners who are appointed by the respective countries. Usually it is the Secretary to the Ministry of Water who functions as the Indus Water Commissioner. And as per the terms of the treaty, they meet regularly. They meet every year. They meet at the start of the year, exchange relevant data regarding water flow, regarding the projects they are planning, and regarding the impact of any major projects that they have executed. So this has become an annual practice where the Indus Water Commissions of India, Pakistan, they meet regularly and they exchange all the relevant data. But every now and then, this treaty has come under question, not just by India, but mainly by Pakistan. Pakistan itself has raised repeated concerns over the treaty and has called for the renegotiation of the treaty. Even though Pakistan is a beneficiary, it has raised many demands, many of them which are unnecessary demands, just to provoke India and to put India on the back foot. India has planned many big projects on the western rivers, including the Baglihar power project, the Kishan Ganga hydropower project, and we are currently executing the Ratle hydropower project. These are some mega projects India has planned, which are allowed under the terms of the treaty. These are run-of-the-mill projects. They don't divert the water, they don't store the water permanently. It doesn't affect the flow of water into Pakistan, but it will help India generate hydropower and meet the requirements of the Indian states and union territories. So India has stayed within the limits of the treaty, but every now and then Pakistan has raised objections. Whenever India plans these projects, India is bound to give notice to Pakistan. We are bound to inform Pakistan as per the provisions of the treaty, and Pakistan usually misuses this opportunity and objects the projects of India and takes it to international tribunals as well. It has filed repeated cases against these projects at the Permanent Court of Arbitration, which is located at The Hague in Netherlands, and it has called for international arbitration in order to delay and derail Indian projects, particularly in the strategic Jammu and Kashmir region. It has become a Pakistani tactic to delay developmental projects in Jammu and Kashmir. So India has been quite frustrated with these Pakistani actions. Since many years, Pakistan has been unfairly claiming that the treaty is biased towards India, and it has called for renegotiation of the treaty. This has been a Pakistani strategy to put pressure on India and to derail India's irrigation and hydropower projects, which are planned particularly in Jammu and Kashmir. Other than that, there is another valid reason why renegotiation of the treaty is needed. This is because of climate change. Pakistan is concerned that because of climate change and global warming, the flow of water has reduced in the Indus River basin. Studies also show that there has been a 5% reduction in water flow as compared to 1960s when the treaty was signed. So because of the reduction in water flow, Pakistan expects the treaty to be renegotiated, which is a fairly understandable argument of Pakistan. But however, the objections it has raised against Indian power projects is purely strategic in nature. It is designed to put pressure on India and derail Indian projects. India has fought these cases at the Court of Arbitration. We have repeatedly pushed for a neutral expert review of these projects, and in many cases the rulings have gone in favor of India. If you take the Baglihar project, Kishan Ganga project for example, when these cases were taken by Pakistan to the Court of Arbitration at The Hague, the rulings went in favor of India. This reiterated the fact that India abides by the terms of the treaty. But however, this hasn't stopped Pakistan from interfering with India's rights. It has repeatedly objected to any changes that India would try to make with regard to water management and water storage projects. Since technology has evolved over the years, today you have better water management, water storage technologies available. Whenever India tries to implement these modern technologies, even then Pakistan raises unnecessary concerns. It keeps blocking these Indian initiatives, and India has been frustrated with these developments. The other reasons why Pakistan has been pushing for renegotiating the Indus Water Treaty is because it expects a joint management between India and Pakistan to manage these waters, to have greater flexibility in how these waters are utilized, and to adopt a river basin-based approach for managing the waters of these 6 rivers. Some of these concerns of Pakistan are understandable, but not all the concerns. Like I said, its concerns against the technological improvements, the dam projects of India, the power plant projects of India, these are unnecessary concerns which are deliberately designed to target India's developmental initiatives. By putting this pressure on India, Pakistan hopes to even bring China on board the Indus Water Treaty. Because don't forget, China is also one of the riparian states, as most of these rivers originate in Tibet. Right? The Indus Basin has its origin in the Tibetan region. So China could potentially become a party to the treaty and play a role here on behalf of Pakistan to corner India and to take away the strategic advantage India enjoys as an upper riparian state. So there have been Pakistani attempts to push towards including China as well as part of any water sharing arrangement so that India could be cornered. Like I said, most of these initiatives by Pakistan, they have been designed to hurt India, they have been designed to put India under pressure. But despite all this, India remained committed to the treaty because one, it was an obligation under international law. We had accepted this as a part of international law, and India being a responsible nation, we always abide by international rules. We abide by our international commitments. We don't want to send out the wrong message by quitting the treaty or by unnecessarily misusing the leverage that we have over Pakistan. Also, India didn't want to weaponize water because water is the lifeline for the common people. And India's problems, India's issues is not with the people of Pakistan. India's issues is with the deep state of Pakistan, the Pakistani army, the ISI and the Pakistani government, which have repeatedly caused problems for India, which have repeatedly waged a covert war against India. So in the interest of human rights, in the interest of protecting the well-being of the Pakistani people as well, India has shied away from weaponizing water. Because water is something which is a basic essential. It's a bare essential. And India has displayed this big gesture of not weaponizing water to punish the people of Pakistan. That wouldn't serve any purpose for India, because our problems are with the Pakistani state, not with the Pakistani people. But despite this gesture by India, Pakistan has tested India's patience. Of late, there has been a growing internal debate in India as well regarding renegotiating the treaty or quitting the treaty altogether to gain a better leverage against Pakistan. Especially since Pakistan keeps sponsoring terror attacks against India. The Indian government has made it clear that blood and water cannot flow together. This statement has been reiterated by Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh as well. India has repeatedly said we cannot engage in talks. We cannot have water sharing arrangements on one side while Pakistan is extracting Indian blood through repeated terror attacks against India. Especially after the Uri attacks of 2016, there has been a strong demand within the Indian government, within India's strategic circles, within India's intellectual community to consider revoking India's partnership with Pakistan over the Indus Water Treaty. There has been a legitimate push given by various quarters that India should consider weaponizing the treaty and use this as a leverage to punish Pakistan and impose a cost on Pakistan for sponsoring terrorism against our country. So this move by India should be seen in this context. See, recently, India has taken further steps to expand the Kishanganga project. We are fast-tracking the Ratle hydropower project. And Pakistan has again tried to block these initiatives by approaching the International Court of Arbitration. So India was frustrated by these developments, and based on this, India has planned a countermeasure. And last week, it issued a notice to Pakistan to discuss the renegotiation of the treaty and consider modifying the treaty itself. This is the first time that India has taken this step, and this could be driven not just by strategic calculations, but also by political calculations. Since Pakistan has repeatedly created strategic and political problems for India by misusing the Indus Water Treaty, India probably is trying to get back at Pakistan, and it has issued a notice to Pakistan to come for negotiations so we can modify the treaty. This could set the stage for India to leverage the advantage that we have over Pakistan. As India is the upper riparian, we could always put Pakistan at a disadvantage. Now, this alone is enough to scare Pakistan because Pakistan is heavily dependent on these waters. So we need to wait and watch how things are going to develop. We need to see what extent will India go to with regard to renegotiating the treaty. But there have been repeated calls in India to quit the treaty altogether. The treaty allows both the parties to renegotiate or even quit the arrangement, because that is always a sovereign decision. But India until now has abided by the terms out of respect towards international law and also by keeping in mind the interests of Pakistani people. But now that Pakistan has repeatedly poked India and irritated India, now India might be carrying out the strategic move to leverage the Indus Water Treaty and impose a cost on Pakistan. So that is why this development is very, very important for both prelims and mains. In prelims, you can expect map-based questions on the Indus River Basin, on the 6 Indus rivers, or also on the basic terms of the treaty which I discussed. There could be a mains question as well, asking you to evaluate the provisions of the treaty and whether India should consider quitting the Indus Water Treaty. So please prepare for this topic. It's very, very important for both prelims and mains. Now moving on to the second topic, it's again related to Pakistan. We shall take a look at the deep economic crisis that the country is suffering from. Over the last few years, Pakistan has been staring at an alarming financial crisis. I'm sure many of you would have heard about this. And this is not a new crisis. It has not emerged all of a sudden. This crisis has been in the making for at least more than 2 decades. Over the last 20-30 years, Pakistan's economic mismanagement its financial blunders, has pushed its economy into a serious crisis, and today, Pakistan is on the brink of economic collapse. Is that clear? Its forex reserves have depleted to dangerous levels. It is staring at a BOP crisis, balance of payments crisis. It does not have enough forex reserves to continue sustaining its imports. Inflation has skyrocketed in Pakistan. You'll not believe, inflation levels have crossed 25%. Inflation levels have touched 25 to 29% in Pakistan. Essential commodities have hit skyrocket prices. Be it food, petrol, diesel, all essential items, the prices have skyrocketed. There is a critical power shortage in the country, a critical shortage of electricity, and most essential items are witnessing a massive inflation. So Pakistan has created this crisis on its own, and we need to understand the factors responsible. So today, if Pakistan does not get a bailout package from its friends and from international institutions, it is going to stare at a complete economic collapse and bankruptcy, similar to what Sri Lanka witnessed a few months ago. So let's understand what kind of situation Pakistan is facing, what emergency measures have been taken by Pakistan over the last few weeks, and what lies ahead for Pakistan. As I pointed out, Pakistan's forex reserves have depleted to just around $5 billion as of December 2022. The State Bank of Pakistan was just left with around $5 billion in its forex kitty. If you take the other commercial banks and other institutions into account, they have another $5.8 billion in forex reserves. So cumulatively, Pakistan is left with just around $10.5 billion of forex reserves, which is hardly enough to meet 3 weeks of imports. It won't be able to sustain imports after this, and thus it will be staring at a balance of payments crisis, which is going to push the country towards bankruptcy. Its currency has collapsed. The Pakistani rupee has seen a major depreciation. Like I said, inflation levels have skyrocketed, and Pakistan does not have enough money left to pay the borrowers. Those who lended money to Pakistan, Pakistan is no longer able to repay the loans. It is not in a position to honor the debt, thereby harming its sovereign credit rating. Its sovereign credit rating has taken a massive hit. And also don't forget, Pakistan was placed under the grey list of FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. Between 2008 and 2022, Pakistan was placed on the grey list 3 times. It has spent a good 7 years on the grey list during this period, and this also has had an impact. Because grey listed countries by Financial Action Task Force, they won't receive flow of capital. Investors are scared to invest in those countries. They usually stay away from these countries. Even foreign lenders usually stay away from these countries. This has affected the overall trade balance of Pakistan, the investment opportunities in the country. It has derailed Pakistan's growth, and this was all a result of Pakistan's direct role in enabling money laundering and terror financing. Pakistan has openly enabled money laundering, organized crime, and terror financing as a part of its covert war against India. It has bred numerous terror outfits, criminal activities to fund these terror groups against India. So finally, under pressure from FATF, under pressure from Western countries, and under pressure from India, Pakistan took an economic hit as well, as it was grey listed for a very long period of time. It was only recently that Pakistan was lifted from the grey list. But the economic impact is there for everyone to see. Today, the critical shortage of essential items is so serious that Pakistan has implemented emergency measures in the last few months. It has ordered malls, restaurants, and wedding halls, etc., to stop using electricity after a certain time. They've been asked to shut down as early as possible so Pakistan can save the energy cost. It's not able to meet its energy imports. It has ordered government offices to reduce electricity consumption. It has come out with many mandatory guidelines for the public to reduce electricity consumption so that it can deal with the power shortage and save millions of dollars in energy imports. These are the kind of measures Pakistan has been forced to take, and that clearly explains the seriousness of the situation. So the factors responsible for this crisis, this didn't happen overnight. It has happened over a period of time. The primary responsible factor is the overall economic mismanagement. The country has gone through long periods of crisis. There has been military coups, repeated military coups in the country. The deep state of Pakistan, which is the hidden arm of the Pakistani state, led by its army and the ISI, have largely controlled decision making. Not just strategic decisions related to its defense policy, foreign policy and nuclear policy, but also the economic policy of Pakistan has more or less been controlled by the deep state. The deep state has cornered all the resources. It used to receive billions of dollars in financial package from Western countries, especially from US. Most of the money has been diverted towards defense modernization. As Pakistan has been obsessed with India, and as it was obsessed with security-based issues, it has spent heavily on defense modernization even while its people were suffering and its economy was collapsing. The right investments weren't made to trigger growth. Basic essential services were neglected for decades together, and many wasteful expenditures were made to modernize the armed forces, to enhance Pakistan's security. By doing this, the army and ISI have retained an iron grip on the decision-making structures in Pakistan, while they have turned the civilian government into a puppet which merely functions at the behest of the army and the ISI. Pakistan has gotten involved into mega projects such as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor as part of the Belt and Road Initiative of China. It has taken heavy loans from China and various countries to execute these unnecessary infrastructure projects. Mega port projects, road and railway projects, power plants have been planned, which are largely designed to benefit China, not Pakistan. And the debt burden falls on the Pakistani state. Parallelly, economic growth has suffered due to poor infrastructure over the decades. And recently, there have been some immediate triggers which have added to the crisis. This crisis, which was in the making for many years, has been accelerated because of few recent developments. The COVID-19 pandemic definitely took a big hit. It hit the Pakistani economy very hard, and the Russia-Ukraine war, which disrupted the supply of commodities, essential commodities, especially oil and gas and essential food items, has increased the import cost for Pakistan. Pakistan has become very import dependent for essential supplies, and the import bill kept rising during the pandemic and especially after the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. Then upon this, Pakistan faced an unfortunate disaster, which was the floods of 2022. The Indus basin witnessed massive flooding just a few months back, which caused severe damage to Pakistan's critical infrastructure and thereby increased Pakistan's dependency on imports. As Pakistan's economy and people were struggling under the onslaught of the floods, Pakistan was forced to import food, medicines, essential supplies, which has increased the burden on the Pakistani economy. So all these factors today have come together to push Pakistan into this deep crisis. And today Pakistan has no other way out apart from asking for help from external partners. In fact, over the last few years, Pakistan has already taken help from its close friends and allies such as China, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates and the United States. China, being an all-weather friend, has provided financial assistance to Pakistan. It has provided fresh loans, it has waived off certain loan repayments, and it has shown more interest to help out the Pakistani economy. Its close allies in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and UAE especially, have also given immense funding to Pakistan. They have given billions of dollars in assistance over the last few years to sustain Pakistan's economy. The US, which had stopped and reduced the financial assistance for a short period, has resumed the financial support especially after the floods. And so Pakistan has been getting some external support from these countries. But this support will not continue forever. So right now, Pakistan has reached a stage where it cannot survive without a bailout package from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is an international organization which assists those countries which are facing such a deep economic crisis, which are on the brink of bankruptcy. But any assistance from IMF is conditional. The IMF, which is dominated by European countries and the US, will impose certain conditions. You will have to initiate economic reforms if the IMF has to provide a bailout package. For example, you have to devalue your currency. Devaluing the currency is a mandatory condition. This is going to harm your import-export balance. It will take away the sovereign economic right of the nation and it will be subjected to IMF influences. You will have to open up your economy for foreign capital, for foreign investments. Even if it harms your domestic industry, you will be forced to open up and introduce free market reforms. And these conditions have to be met in order to get any assistance, any bailout package from the IMF. In 2019, the IMF had approved a $7 billion package. First, it approved a $6 billion package, and next year in 2020, another $1 billion package was approved. But this money has not reached Pakistan yet. Pakistan is yet to fulfill some of the conditions. So right now, in the last few days, negotiations have started between Pakistan and IMF to ensure that this bailout package is released immediately in order to support the Pakistani economy. Even with this bailout package, Pakistan's crisis will not be over. This is only a temporary solution. So Pakistan will have to correct its path, at least now, or else it is going to definitely suffer the impact of this economic crisis. Parallelly, Pakistan is facing a very serious security threat. Internally, there are many terror groups such as the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which has been targeting the Pakistani state. The Pakistani state has been losing its grip, especially along the Afghan border. And such an economic crisis is very bad news for the state of Pakistan, especially for the army and the ISI. This is a nightmare scenario for every country, including India, because if the Pakistani state were to collapse economically, or if terror groups and insurgent groups like TTP were to gain a stronger hold, then this would be a nightmare scenario because don't forget, Pakistan is a nuclear weapon state. There is every possibility of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal falling into the wrong hands. So this is what worries India, US and many other countries, and hence it's very important to stabilize the Pakistani economy. So that is why the topic is very, very important for our exams. Now moving on to the third topic, we shall talk about the World Economic Forum. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago, when the World Economic Forum Annual Summit started at Davos in Switzerland, we had a discussion on this topic. There I had explained the background to World Economic Forum. Who started it? When was it started? What is the primary objective of the World Economic Forum? What are the important reports that are brought out by World Economic Forum? All these basic facts were covered. Now let's focus on the outcomes of the summit, which recently concluded in January. In the last week of January, the World Economic Forum Annual Summit came to an end. And the theme of the summit was cooperation in a fragmented world. Because currently the global economy and global geopolitics has been fragmented. Many countries have become conservative and inward-looking. They are reversing the gains of globalization. They are focusing more on regional trade agreements, free trade agreements. Many countries are involved in conflicts and clashes against each other. For example, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Cold War between Russia and Western countries, the ongoing rivalry between China and the Western countries. So these divides, these fissures which have come up, it has fragmented the world, and hence the World Economic Forum is highlighting the need for global cooperation. Or else the fragmented world will further divide the global economy with very serious implications for every country that's involved. So World Economic Forum brings together not just government leaders from around the world, it will also bring together private business leaders, think tanks, strategic experts and economic experts, intellectuals, non-government organizations, international organizations like UN and various UN bodies. They all come together at World Economic Forum to discuss the pressing economic challenges and geopolitical challenges that are affecting the global economy. So following these discussions, there have been few important outcomes. First, let's talk about the global economic outlook that was brought out at the end of the World Economic Forum Summit. During this gathering, most of the experts, the participants, they agreed that the world is staring at a possible recession. Around the world, there is a decline in economic growth. Job creation has come to a halt. Mass layoffs are happening around the world. Inflation has shot up. The pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war is clearly having an impact, a long-term impact. So during this crisis period, private business leaders, they have shown optimism that US and European Union are likely to escape the impact of the ongoing recession. They anticipate that global economic growth is going to pick up very soon. We might avoid or we might avert the worst case scenario of a global recession. This is the optimism expressed by industry leaders. They're also optimistic because China has finally ended its zero COVID policy. It has lifted the lockdowns, the curbs that were in place to contain the pandemic, and we might expect a revival in China's economic activities. So as the Chinese economy opens up and as US and Europe start a slow recovery, private business leaders, several central banks and government leaders, they are hopeful that we might avoid the worst case scenario of a global recession. However, many of them have struck a note of caution. Many central bank governors, they have urged caution because inflation rates remain very high even now. Because during the pandemic, when most countries went into a lockdown, in order to trigger economic growth and support the economy, most central banks, they came out with very easy monetary policies. They reduced interest rates to an all-time low. They flooded the world with liquidity. And today, it has led to a serious inflationary situation. In most economies, inflation remains very high. And hence, in the last few months, you notice that central banks are increasing interest rates. This has led to a flight of capital from developing economies back towards stable developed markets such as the US. Whenever the US Fed, the Federal Reserve, increases interest rates, it shows that the US market is stabilizing and capital from around the world, especially from developing countries like India, will take flight back to developed nations and stable markets like the US. So a note of caution has been struck by many leaders, governors of central banks. They've urged that inflation still remains high. There could be further setbacks as well. Because as China opens up the economy, there could be a sudden surge in energy consumption. If China's energy imports increases, this could further drive up energy prices. It could increase oil and gas prices, which could further destabilize the economy. So there are many risk factors which are still present. So they say that optimism is good, but be cautious. Be cautious because there are still many risks present and the economy is going through a very turbulent phase, and this requires global cooperation in order to overcome this crisis. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is still ongoing. It has not come to an end. Any further escalation of the conflict could also lead to further destabilization of the global markets. Ukraine, during the World Economic Forum Summit, has called for more military support to fight back the Russian invasion. It has reiterated its demand for advanced weapons from the Western countries. It has called for an immediate reconstruction fund to be established so that Ukraine can rebuild itself and reverse the damage caused by the Russian invasion. So these demands were also heard during the annual summit of the World Economic Forum. Then with regard to climate change, there has been a very big development. All the leaders who participated, they have agreed that it is essential to switch towards green and clean energy. It's vital to bring down emissions and fight climate change as a common goal. To enable this, they have established a new initiative, and please make a note of this. The World Economic Forum has established Amplify Earth Action, or GAEA, Giving to Amplify Earth Action. This is a financial platform which has been created with 45 partners, many developed countries, global financial institutions, including the World Bank and the World Economic Forum. They have collectively come together to form this initiative, the GAEA, or the Giving to Amplify Earth Action, which will provide $3 trillion of financing to help achieve net zero goal and to reverse the loss of biodiversity and loss of environment that we are facing as a result of climate change and global warming. These funds will primarily help poor countries, small island states and developing nations. And developed countries and the big financial institutions are meant to pool in these resources through public-private philanthropic partnership. The key pillar of this initiative is 4 Ps. Public-private philanthropic partnership. It brings together governments, especially of the developed countries, other private organizations, and as well as philanthropic institutions that provide for charity, which are non-government entities. So collectively, it is creating a partnership, a global partnership to give to amplify Earth action. So $3 trillion worth of finance is expected to be pooled under this initiative, which will be distributed to the most affected countries, the poor countries, developing nations, so they can reverse the impact of climate change. They can mitigate the impact of climate change. So this is an important outcome of the World Economic Forum Annual Summit. Then coming to India-centric initiatives at the Annual Summit of World Economic Forum, there were at least 50 high-intense projects which were taken up that involves India. Around 50 big projects are being sponsored in India by various private and philanthropic institutions. And some of the important initiatives which will come up in India includes a partnership in Maharashtra for urban transformation. The World Economic Forum and few countries will help the state government of Maharashtra and the Maharashtra Institution for Transformation, or MITRA, in transforming the urban areas in the state of Maharashtra to deal with the problems of urbanization. And a healthcare facility is being set up in Telangana, which is backed by the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovations, which is again funded by many Western countries. This facility will aim to develop new age vaccines for future epidemics and pandemics. To deal with contagious diseases of the future, new vaccines will be developed at this facility, which will come up in Telangana. So these are 2 big initiatives that India has secured at the World Economic Forum Summit. So please make a note of this, could be helpful for your prelims. Now this brings us to the last topic, the Russia-Ukraine conflict and a big development related to this conflict. Ukraine, as you know, was demanding for advanced weaponry from Western countries. Since the last year, Ukraine has got financial support, intelligence support. It has got small-scale weapons in the form of drones, guns, military training, etc. But Western countries were hesitant to supply heavy weaponry. They were hesitant to provide heavy weapons to Ukraine because they feared they might instigate Russia, which is a nuclear-armed state. Since Putin was behaving very unpredictably and had even threatened exercising the nuclear option, Western countries, particularly the NATO allies, they were little hesitant to escalate the conflict by supplying heavy weaponry to Ukraine. But now they have announced a major decision. US and Germany both have agreed to supply state-of-the-art battle tanks to Ukraine to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian invasion and push back the Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. Across eastern Ukraine, there has been a stalemate in the conflict. Ukraine has achieved a lot of battlefield victories. It has pushed back the Russian forces. Russia has repeatedly stepped up the attacks. Periodically, it has launched missiles, airstrikes, and caused large-scale devastation across eastern Ukraine. So to break the stalemate and to give Ukraine an advantage against Russia, US and Germany have taken a major step and they have promised to supply advanced battle tanks. The US will be supplying around 31 M1 Abrams tanks, and Germany has agreed to supply 14 Leopard 2 tanks. These two battle tanks in question, they are some of the most advanced battle tanks that are available today. And both countries have agreed to supply a small batch of these battle tanks to Ukraine, which could help Ukraine fight back against Russian artillery and push back Russian advances. So Ukraine has welcomed this development. Ukraine has said this is the biggest step Western countries have taken in the conflict. Russia, on the other hand, has criticized the Western countries and has called it a blatant provocation. In fact, Russia even retaliated immediately by launching fresh missile strikes and airstrikes against Ukrainian cities. So the conflict is likely to escalate from here, but strategic experts believe that these two battle tanks could potentially be a game changer. Because see, the US battle tank, which is M1 Abrams tanks that you see here in the image, it's considered one of the most advanced battle tanks in the world. It comes with an advanced armor, a very strong protective armor. It has modern navigation tools, modern radar systems, and comes with a massive firepower. It can deliver very precise and devastating strikes against the enemy. Already, the US is using these battle tanks along with many NATO allies. Many allies of the US, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and many others, they've already procured this advanced battle tank. So the US supplying these tanks to Ukraine could potentially be a game changer, because Russian battle tanks are pretty outdated compared to the tanks that US and Germany are looking to provide. This could give Ukraine that advantage, that extra edge over Russian forces. The Leopard 2 tanks of Germany, even they are equally advanced. It has modern armor protection. It can withstand most of the conventional attacks. It has a very massive firepower. It is widely deployed across European countries. Many allies of Germany in Europe, they already operate the Leopard 2 tanks. It is also considered as one of the most modern battle tanks. So it's quite easy for Germany to supply these tanks to Ukraine. And many experts believe this could potentially be a game changer. But however, there are critics who question this argument. Because see, providing 31 battle tanks, 14 battle tanks is not going to make a difference. And also these battle tanks will not be delivered immediately. It's going to take time. Because these battle tanks are very complex systems, especially the American tank, the M1 Abrams tanks. They are very expensive and the technology is complicated. So it will take time to deploy them in the battlefield, and Ukrainian forces have to be trained, which is going to be time consuming. Next is the question of logistics, the question of repair and service, which is also going to be challenging for Ukraine and US. It's not easy to provide the spare parts required on time, to train Ukraine forces to repair them on their own. So deployment, training, the cost, these could be the shortcomings, the roadblocks for the deployment of these battle tanks, and hence critics say that this could not be a game changer. It may not turn the battle overnight. Ukraine was actually demanding at least 300 battle tanks. But US and Germany have promised hardly around 40 odd battle tanks. So this may not be enough to turn the tide. And also the cost is high, the deployment logistics are involved, repair, service cost, then training of the personnel. All these are complicated tasks which might take several weeks or several months to achieve. By then, Russia might step up its attacks. Russia might go into a new offensive, and it might even potentially escalate tensions with Western countries. Since Western countries have escalated one step by providing heavy weaponry to Ukraine, now Russia might also consider an escalation against the Western countries itself. So these are the possibilities that exist, and hence critics are not sure that whether these battle tanks could change the battle on the field. Alright, so that is why this development is very important. So on this note, I would like to bring my discussion to an end. We have covered 4 important geopolitical developments of the last week, and we have covered them in detail. I hope it was a fruitful, productive session. If you liked it, do support us by sharing your comments, press the like button, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching. Good night.